Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Hope your language learning has been going well. If it hasn't, well, that's life. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. Our job as independent language learners is to stop, take stock, figure out what's going wrong, figure out what we need to do better, and reset and get on with it. That's what I've been doing recently. I was just about to talk about the weather because yesterday we had snow in London, which doesn't happen very often, so it was quite exciting. Although it was this kind of pathetic kind of snow where you've got like a thin, translucent layer of white on top of the pavement sort of thing. But then as I was just about to talk about that more, I thought about a conversation that I've had with a few Italians recently who said, Ollie, in Italy, we don't talk about the weather. It's something that you never do. And so I started to sort of catch myself and think, man, am I just becoming really English as I get older, like just talking about the weather all the time? Because we love to talk about the weather. But isn't it interesting that in Italy, you just simply do not discuss the weather? It just kind of goes to show how important, there was a question on the podcast, I don't know, a few months back, like, is culture important to language learning? This is one of these great examples, I think, of where it really is, because if you didn't know that, if you didn't know that Italians don't talk about the weather, then you might, as an English person, for example, just turn up and talk about the weather and say, oh, it's really hot or it's really cold. And then, just because of what you were talking about, instantly be un-Italian. But anyway, I'm not Italian. I'm English, and so part of what you get here on the podcast is the occasional update on London weather. So that's just what you get, I'm afraid. Okay, today it's a solo episode entitled Why You Shouldn't Listen to Slow Audio. I recently had an email about a week or so ago from a conversations customer, and he said, Ollie, I love conversations, it's great, but I've got one big criticism of it, which is that the audio is too fast. The speed at which you're speaking, the characters are speaking is too fast. And he went on to say, I like to use tools like Yabla where you can slow down the audio. So I thought that was very interesting. And I actually wrote a long reply by email. And then I went on to post that reply, anonymously, of course, in the Facebook group, and the Fluency Mastermind Facebook group, which you should join. If you haven't, go to Facebook and search for Fluency Mastermind. You'll find it there. Lots of great language conversation going on in that group. So what he's saying is that he loves the content of conversations, but it's too fast, and that is a criticism of the material. Now, I think this is a big mistake, and I'm going to talk about why in this episode, and I'm going to talk about why you should not slow down the audio that you're listening to. So the background to this, I guess, is that there are some websites that are becoming quite popular now for language learning. One such example is News in Slow Spanish. I think they probably have it in other languages as well. But I've noticed in the Facebook group, in the discussions that we've been having, that a lot of people say, yeah, I really like News in Slow Spanish, blah, 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 because I can slow it down and understand the words that are being said. I also mentioned earlier in the email that I received Yabla, which is an interesting tool. I quite like it, actually. I don't use it myself for a number of reasons. I won't get into that now. I think there are faults with it. But if you want to check out that, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/Yabla, which is Yabla. It's basically video with transcriptions and things like that you can slow down. So I've noticed that a lot of people are using these tools or these websites to listen to slow language that they're learning. So the question is this helpful or is this dangerous? So the person that wrote this email to me about conversations specifically referenced these. And so what this tells me right away is a few things. First of all, this person said that the level is perfect for me, but it's too fast, which makes it clear that there is an issue with listening skills here. Because if the language is comfortable for you, but you don't understand it being spoken, then it's your listening skills that need work. And secondly, that there's a certain amount of misunderstanding, I think, around listening skills. And it's not surprising because listening skills are quite complicated. Now, a few weeks ago, I recorded 3 podcast episodes on this topic. It's a 3-part series all about why listening skills are difficult and what to do to improve it. So if you haven't heard those, go back and listen to those. It starts at episode 223, I believe. And so I think obviously not everybody listens to the podcast, so they haven't necessarily heard my thoughts on this or heard the sort of rationale as to why this is important and why Conversations in particular was made to address that. But today what I want to focus on is specifically this question of slowing down the audio. Because like I said, I've noticed that people are using these tools and I don't think it's a very good thing to do. All right? So, slowing down the audio. Should you listen to slow audio in whatever form it takes? Is this helpful or is it dangerous? Okay, so let's backtrack. When you're listening to spoken language, whatever language it is, when you listen to someone speaking, there are only 2 reasons you will not understand what's being said. Number 1 is that you don't know the words that are being used or the grammar. In other words, you don't understand the language. Or number 2, that you can't cope with the fast speech. Let's go over that one more time. I'll restate it. There are only 2 reasons that you won't understand something that's spoken to you in another language. Number 1, the first reason is that you don't understand or you don't know the words and the grammar that are being used. And number 2 is that the speech is so fast that you can't quite deal with it. And that is typically because when you speak, when native speakers talk, the pronunciation of words changes a little bit. Okay, so those are the only 2 reasons you won't understand something. So, how does slowing down the audio help you deal with that? Well, first thing, this is the big point really, if you slow down the speed of what you're listening to, immediately you are no longer helping your listening skills. Because when you listen to slow language, it's not natural anymore. And it lacks the features of fast speech. As I said before, when you speak quickly, the words change. You don't pronounce words the same way as you do when you are speaking slowly like this. So if you're listening to stuff that's being spoken slowly, immediately you are depriving yourself of the opportunity to improve your listening skills. So immediately by slowing it down, you are not doing the one thing that you think you're doing. All right. So the benefit of slowing stuff down, and this is a benefit, is that it gives you more time to process the information, which means to think about the words that are being used. So simply, if you slow down what I'm saying right now, then you're going to have more time to listen to the words and think about what I'm saying. All right. But let's be very clear. This is not giving yourself more time to think about the words and phrases is not practicing your listening skills. This is doing something different. By slowing it down and giving yourself more time to listen to the words and phrases that I'm using, what you're essentially doing is you're studying the language. You're trying to learn new vocabulary. You're trying to improve your understanding of grammar. It does nothing for your listening skills. And so the effect of this is that if you are permanently listening to slow language, you're never doing the one thing that you need to do in order to understand fast language, which is to actually be listening to the fast language. Okay? Now, of course, the problem is people will say, well, yeah, but Ollie, you think when I listen to the fast language, it's so fast that I can't understand the words that are being used. And so I feel like I'm wasting my time. Right, exactly. And this is where Conversations came from. If you don't understand the words and grammar that are being used, then you've got 2 choices. Number 1, you listen to stuff that's easier. And I think many people just spend their time listening to stuff that's far too hard for them. Don't listen to movies and listen to podcasts if you feel completely lost when you're listening to them. It doesn't help you. Remember the principle of comprehensible input. It's all about listening to stuff that's at your level plus a little bit, just to push you a little bit. Okay, this is where Conversations came from. Not to keep referencing Conversations, but this is the context of this whole discussion, really, that the speed is too fast. So anyway, going back. Number 1, you can listen to stuff that's at your level or that's easier. Number 2, and ideally do both of these, you keep listening at the natural speed, right? But you use the transcript to help you understand. So when there's a word that you don't understand, when there's some grammar that you don't get, don't slow down the audio, keep listening to it over and over again. But what you can do at the same time is pause it, go back, read the transcript so you can see the words that are being used, actually study that stuff, Look it up in the dictionary if you want to. Think about the grammar that's being used. Take your time to read the words at your own speed with the transcript. But then go back and listen to the audio again so that you can hear, once you understand it, go back and listen to the full speed audio so you can hear what that sounds like when it's spoken at natural speed. This is how you improve your listening skills. There's two problems. Problem number one is that you don't understand. Problem number two is that it's spoken too quickly for you. They're two different problems. Keep listening at the natural speed so that you have the opportunity to improve your listening skills, but then use the learning tools that come with the material that you're using to actually study it so you can learn the words and phrases. Okay, so that is I hope I've broken that down in as clear as possible a way. There's a really big danger. I mean, look, I do understand why people want to slow it down. It's more comfortable, right? You feel like you can learn more when it's slower because you have the time to pick out the words. But just be clear that what you're doing is not improving your listening skills. You're studying language. And so then the question is listening to slow audio the best way to improve your level in a language? I would argue, not really. If you want to learn more stuff, learn more words and phrases and improve your grammar, then just, by all means listen to the audio. But what you should really be doing is lots of reading. Because that's when you've got time to stop and look, go back, reread the sentence, underline something maybe. You've got much more time to actually study the language when you're reading stuff. So do lots of reading and then add the audio, of course, but do it at a natural speed. There's a lot in here, isn't there? I do my best to explain this in as clear a way as I can, and you can be the judge of whether I achieve that or not. Maybe you can let me know in the comments whether how clearly you think I'm explaining this. The show notes to this will be at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 232. But despite I've got quite a lot of experience explaining this stuff, and however well I do, let's assume that I am doing a good job of explaining it. I completely understand how for someone that's kind of new to language learning, this is a lot to take in. And you kind of have to have faith, really, that keeping listening to stuff at full speed is actually helping you. You have to be comfortable not understanding everything all at once. And so this is why it's so important to find material that is, that is not too difficult for you. I think one of the biggest problems of all when it comes to listening skills is the fact that people simply use the wrong material. If they used stuff that was simpler, but still at full speed, I think, you have a very, very different experience from everything. And certainly when it comes to conversations, which was created for that very purpose, the feedback I've been getting so far has been really good. And there's tons and tons of comments. If you're in the Facebook group, you'll be seeing all the comments coming in. We've got dozens and dozens of comments from people and what they're doing is they are articulating the process that they go through. And typically what these comments say is something like this. They say, well, I've listened to the first 7 chapters. And at first, it was really hard. I felt it was too fast. But I kept doing what Ollie suggested, and I kept listening at the real speed, then following along with the transcripts, and I kept it up. And then by the time I got to chapter 7 or so, I was used to the speed of the language, which is quite a quick transformation, really, to go from it all being too fast to actually being used to people speaking at that speed. And then a few people have said, when I've gone back to my other material I used to be using, like my textbook or whatever, it just sounded far too slow and unnatural for me. And that's the transformation that I'm really, really happy to see. So hopefully this episode gives you a little bit more context, maybe helps you understand a little bit better the challenge of improving your listening. I guess I should say that I do sometimes slow down the audio that I'm listening to, but not often. The only time I do it, because it can be helpful in certain situations to slow down a little passage of audio. But when I do it, it is when I'm listening to something that's fast and there's lots of kind of transformation going on in the pronunciation, what's known as connected speech. So I might read a sentence in the transcription, but then the audio sounds nothing like it. But this happens a lot in Cantonese, where the audio is totally different because there's lots of words that just get swallowed or something. So in that case, I really want to go back and understand the pronunciation of and the articulation of these words. So in that situation, it is actually quite helpful to go back and listen to that passage. And I use the Speater app for this on iPhone, SPEATER. That is helpful. But you see, what I'm doing there is I'm slowing it down in order to understand a particular pronunciation issue, because that helps to kind of decode how something is pronounced. But 99.9% of the time, it is, I'm listening to it at full speed, because it's just, I understand that what I'm doing is conditioning myself to understand that fast language. All right, then. So that's what I got for you today. If you'd like to leave me a question to be answered on the podcast, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask for that. And at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. So today I mentioned a lot of things. I mentioned News in Slow Spanish, Yabla, a couple of apps, and there's also a blog post I wrote that dives into listening skills a bit more. So what I would encourage you to do, I think, is actually go off and try these things for yourself. Like, go off and try some of these slow websites, see what you think, and then go and try conversations and see what the difference is, and then go and listen to a radio show or a movie and see how damn hard that is, and just go off and try things that offer different approaches, and just be aware of what's going on with your listening. Be aware of how it's challenging you in different ways, because you may well come to a different conclusion than me, and that's fine. But if you want to understand this topic more deeply, then really what you've got to do is go off and just experiment with all these things in mind. That's what helps you to become better, more confident, independent language learner. Links to everything I've mentioned today in the show notes, iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 232. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free. See if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.